Started streaming. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to everybody in the gallery. I'd like to formally declare open this unscheduled planning committee meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on 30th of July 2024. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decision to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. I'd like to acknowledge we've got 5 councillors in the room and 2 online. Joining us, Councillor Hart and Councillor Costin. There's no apologies. I'd also like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land and their elders past, present, and welcome any descendants here today. Please be advised that this unscheduled council meeting is recorded live and streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of the meeting. The live stream recording of the afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in the unscheduled committee meeting, individuals consent to use and disclosure of information they share at the meeting, including any personal or sensitive information. And before I go on, I'd also like to acknowledge the death of John Mounsell, who was Shire Secretary here for 25 years up to 1995. Mr Mounsell was really well known in our community and we'd like to pass on our condolences to his family. Now I'd like to move on to any declarations of interest. No declarations of interest. Confirmation of minutes. There are no minutes to confirm at this meeting today.
Excuse me, Chair. Just before we move into that or any further, we have 2 councillors who are joining us online, and I just want to check that we can see them. I just want to check that they can hear the meeting. I'm not sure if we have a tech issue.
Yes, I can hear, see you.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Councillor Hart.
I can. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Now we move to the officers' report, and the item we move to is 7.1, use and development of a special class broiler farm, use and development of 4 dwellings and associated works at 320 Malerick Road, Birregurra. The purpose of this report is to inform the Planning Committee on the application for the use and development of a special class broiler farm, use and development of 4 dwellings and associated works at 320 Malerick Road, Birregurra. A detailed officer report assessing the merits of the proposal has been circulated and provided to councillors. Please note a revised officer's recommendation has also been circulated, and on that I'll ask the CEO to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. So I just want to explain that the officer's report, including the recommendation, was presented to Council last week, and Council resolved to defer that matter to tonight's meeting, which is why we are here. Through the recent days, having read, no doubt for the 100th time, the recommendation and having heard some questions, the officers have decided that some of the conditions could be made even clearer. And so there is a revised officer recommendation that does not change the content of the report or the premise or the recommendation in substance. I'm just going to ask probably our Manager of Planning and Strategic Focus just to touch on those specific conditions that have just had some wording made clearer so that those in the gallery understand. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. There's been the addition of a new condition. I refer you to condition 18. There were some concerns raised in the community about groundwater, and that's just to clarify that the proposal does not seek to use groundwater, and should that change, there'd be an amendment to a permit required at a later stage that would allow those considerations. So that condition is simply there to clarify that situation, that the water source will be harvested and it will come through the Birregurra Town Water Supply pipeline. There's a revised condition 37, and this clarifies some ambiguity that was around about what defines a truck movement in and out of the broiler farm. So that seeks to clarify that condition. Condition 59 deals with the 4 dwellings that are proposed as part of the application. can hear me okay? Yep. And just to put the addition in that it can include not only employees but their families can also reside in those homes. And then condition 60 goes on from that just to add some clarity to the expectation, or in the event the broiler farm use ceased. It just allows some leeway and additional time if that occurred for families to remain in those dwellings. So should that cease, and it provides a timeline for that to be dealt with, and it allows in the event there might be a future planning application, it would enable that to be considered before the dwellings needed to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Rudd. So before I ask for a motion, do councillors have any questions of officers? I can see that. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a couple of questions, but the first one relates to the new condition 60. I don't read it how the council officer, council management is saying that condition reads, and council is well aware that I've raised concerns that there could be a valid planning application lodged that hasn't been decided, and the way this condition reads, they could be required to remove the dwellings even though there might be a valid planning application lodged, because it says through submission and approval of a planning application, then goes on to say the dwelling must be removed within 12 months of the use ceasing. So I think we're at least entitled to have a shared understanding of what condition 60 says, because I believe that this, if there was a valid application lodged, there could still be enforcement action requiring the houses to be removed, even though council hasn't made a decision on a relevant planning application for a different use that requires the dwellings.
Mr Rudd, did you want to?
Yeah, just a moment. Sorry. Yeah, I can appreciate through you, Mayor, the question. I suppose there's a difference between the way the permits are recorded and the practical application. So if there's a planning application in and it's reasonable to assume there'll be discretion, but I do take the councillor's point about the absolute. You can read that literally to say, and I agree with the councillor, that you can read that literally to say, look, yeah, if council wanted to be really difficult, it would be an unusual situation for that to happen, but they could undertake enforcement action. So the suggestion there might be to add, should a new permit not be issued at the end of that condition. And
Thank
that
you, Mr. Rudd.
might, I think that would go some way to meeting the concerns raised by Councillor Hart. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hart, have you got another question?
Well, two things, Mayor. First of all, if those words were to be added, that would alleviate my concern. It's not clear to me whether the officers are prepared to add that as an officer recommendation. It's only a few words. The other question I have is relation to truck movements and the condition, I think it's 36, although it might be the new 37. Can we have an explanation, please, of truck movements? If a truck drives down Malerick Road, past the house at number 30 to the broiler farm, and then the same truck drives back from the broiler farm past the house a second time and leaves the area, is that 2 truck movements? Or because it's the one truck, is it counted as 1 truck movement? This is relevant to what 12 truck movements means. Does that mean 12 passing of that house, or could it potentially mean 24?
Through you, Mayor. The purpose of the new condition 37 is to deal with truck movements between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. the following morning. So it is to deal with night movements of trucks. For the broiler farm activity to operate, they need to remove the birds during the evening hours when they're much more settled. And there is the expectation that there would be 12 truck movements. So those trucks may come in at 4 p.m. and leave sometime within that 12-hour period. So for the purpose of the conversation and the permit condition, 1 truck movement is 1 truck in, 1 truck out.
Councillor Hart.
So just we can be absolutely clear, because this should be a simple question. 12 truck movements could really mean 24 passing of the house. That's the truck comes in and the truck goes out. So the house at 30 Malerick Road could be passed 24 times and that would still be 12 truck movements. That's my understanding from what was said. Is that a correct understanding, please?
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Just looking for some clarity from the officers, please. My understanding there was just to clarify for Councillor Hart here, there was some ambiguity there, I think, between our counting of truck movements and the applicants. I think the applicant was reporting truck movements of in and out as 2 of the same truck, whereas we're reporting the in and out of that same truck as 1. And so that's why we've got the wording we have here, just to clarify that's context. And I think that was in the material that I read it.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. In the officer report provided, and if you look on page... the truck movements are on page 47, and it talks on the top of page 48 that the number of movements in and out is 1 movement and are expected to be. So for the purpose of the table that's shown on page 47, those movements are a 2-way movement. Now, if you would like, it's important to look at the headings along the top of the columns to understand the difference. There's per farm, and then there's the whole property. The whole property is referring to the 2 sites, the 2 sets of 12 sheds, whereas the per farm is referring to 1 set of 12 sheds.
So notwithstanding these differences of interpretation, the outcome will be the same as the number of trucks that we're proposing either way.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Many of the submissions are concerned about waters, overland flows, stormwater, rainfall on the site. I'm just wondering if officers could just run over how those waters are being treated. Are they managed separately?
Through you, Mayor, there's two components. There's the two sets of sheds and the retention basins will have a bunding of 60 centimetres all around each set of 12 sheds and the retention basin. So there'll be two bunded areas. Within that bunded area, all stormwater from the sheds will be collected and treated within the bunded area and reused as part of the farming operation. Any areas outside the bunded area will be directed away outside the bunding and will run through the property as it does currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further question, if I may.
Follow-up question then, Councillor Arnott.
Okay, many of the submitters are concerned about the environmental impact, also quite apart from waters, but in the broader context. In condition 6, we've required an environmental management plan to be submitted to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. And it seems to be the catch-all solution to the environmental concerns. What will that environmental plan consider, and who determines whether it's a satisfactory environmental plan or not? Will it be referred to other organisations as well? And finally, who enforces that environmental management plan?
Through you, Mayor, the question is based upon the environmental management plan that is required for the broiler farm operations, and it needs to be prepared and approved by the responsible authority, being council. The plan is in accordance with the broiler code, and the broiler code specifically stipulates what's actually required within that plan. That plan, one moment. Sorry for the delay. So the environmental management plan has to cover off a number of issues which deal with the management of facilities and stormwater, management of the outdoor range area, odour and dust management, noise management, road and traffic management, landscaping management, waste management issues, including the treatment of dead birds, spent litter, waste chemicals and chemical containers, chemical handling, fire prevention, contingency plans, day-to-day best practice management. It deals with all things such as fire, shed malfunctions, gas leakages, flooding, etc. The environmental management plan is a plan that's submitted to council from time to time, and it's it is in consultation. Sorry, just one moment. I need to refer to my notes. Apologies for the delay. The condition 7 deals with the routine audits of the broiler code, and that would be done in consultation with the EPA and the RSPCA and Agriculture Victoria. So the plan would be submitted to council and we would liaise with those authorities.
Thank you. And if there are complaints in the future, how will they be managed?
So, yeah, through you, Mayor, if there are complaints received, obviously depends on the nature of those complaints, whether they're matters that are actionable through the planning permit conditions. There may be some instances where, say if it's an odour-related complaint or something like that, it might be the Environment Protection Authority. I'll just check through you, Mayor, if that answers the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Rudd. Councillor Arnott.
Through you, Mayor, I just flag the intent to move a motion consistent with acceptance of the officer's recommendation, subject to a slight alteration.
We'll finish the questions first. Any other questions of officers? No other questions? CEO, you want to make a comment?
Through the chair, just if there are no other questions, I just want to ask officers if after those questions, is there any view that any extra words should be added, or are you comfortable to leave the recommendation and for the councillors to address the wording if needed?
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor. Further to the discussion before and the question from Councillor Hart, we'd propose to add just to the end of condition 60, should a new permit, should a new permit not be issued? Just to the end.
To add those onto that.
That's right.
That was the intent of the extra wording I was seeking. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, that captures what you're... Thank you. Thank you. Okay, no...
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for number 60. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further question, one more comment, CEO.
I just want to give the officers an opportunity just to confirm, is there any thought on any other points, or are we happy to leave it there? So we also discussed condition 37. Are we comfortable to leave that as it is?
Can you scroll to number 37, thanks?
It relates to just, are we very clear about how truck movements are to be interpreted?
Thank you.
Mayor, just to clarify, and just to make it crystal clear, we could put the end of it in brackets, i.e. a movement can be considered as the equivalent of a return trip.
And then there's no ambiguity.
Close brackets. Just to make it 100%.
Just to make it absolutely clear.
Yes.
If Mr Rudd's comfortable, we could...
Yep. So do you want to give the words so we can get that up on the screen, please, Mr Rudd?
Yep.
Got the words? Thank you, and that makes it very clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy with that.
Happy with that, Councillor Arnott. So if there's no other questions, officers have got a revised recommendation with a few additions that I think everybody's comfortable with. So I'd like to ask if anyone would like to move a motion.
That's the motion.
Councillor Arnott, is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Hart?
Well, mine's an amendment when you're ready. It's not... So I suppose technically it's opposing, but I have an amendment when you're ready.
Have an amendment. Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. And I think it's important for the community to understand, for an application of this nature, there will always be components of the application that we as councillors will need to address. within the application, and there'll be other components of the application that are addressed by the relevant authorities. And that might be such things as the power supply to it. So the power companies need to determine whether they can get that there, the water supply, Barwon Water, Corangamite Catchment Authority, whether there's capacity to get water to it and continue to feed that in, and also for the Corangamite Catchment Authority for the Barwon Water for water supply, Corangamite Catchment Authority for the drainage and the protection of the waterways and the environments, and the heritage of the area for the local heritage organisations. So with the feedback of all those, we get to this point now where we're asked as the councillors to make a decision on this as a commercial proposal and whether it's appropriate within the context. With that, it ticks the boxes as far as our strategic plan is for the Shire to encourage the development of intensive farming of this sort of nature. It's within our strategic plan. It is also within the strategic directives of state and federal government for broiler farms that we facilitate this in an appropriate manner. Some concerns have been raised about this application, about it being used for free range. And I think that needs to be put into context. And one particular person suggested an amount of 280 tonnes of manure may be deposited on the ground. And I think that needs to be brought into some context here. The sheds occupy an area of about 230,000 square metres. About half of that is actually open area between the sheds. That's where this free range, so-called free range, will occur. The reality is only about 2% of the birds will actually make advantage of that. They don't want to leave the sheds. That's where the food and water is. That's where they're comfortable. They go outside in this grass area. There's no food and water out there. They tend not to hang around out there much. But if you think about that, and the birds have to be at least 3 weeks old before they can get out there, full weight, to be protected enough to get out there, full feather is the term, then they've only got a maximum of 2 to 3 weeks out there. With all that in place, and you divide that 280 tonnes by the square metre area, we'll cut that in half. To cut it back again, you end up with about a kilo and a bit of deposit per square metre. And that's over a period of 3 weeks, and then you have a 6 weeks break before you get another lot of birds back in after the sheds are cleaned out, before they're old enough to go out there again. I challenge that against practice management, the normal practice of having cattle on a farm where the deposits are much larger and attracting flies and all that sort of thing. I'm not criticising that management, I'm just trying to bring this into perspective. I don't think it's a big problem. Added to that, it's all confined within abatements, which holds all this together in one area, and any runoff is contained into dams. So it addresses those concerns. So the stormwater is also important to manage. We've got that managed again within the same context I just mentioned above. Barwon Water has decided that the water supply to the premises is fine. And the applicant, as far as I can see, has made considerable effort to try to mitigate concerns of the other residents along Maleric Road, to try to come to an understanding about the valid concerns about traffic movement and noise abatement and such. And we're trying to address that with this application. And I congratulate the officers in trying to put in there a mechanism that allows for that conciliation to continue on beyond the date of this being approved. So for some of you, you may remember the Arnott's Poultry Farm as being a bit of a landmark out in the corner of Kenny's Road and Colac Road. That's where I grew up. That might have smelled a little bit from time to time because we used to keep manure on site there for a bit before it was cleared away. But the reality is, unless you keep your sheds clean and dry and well ventilated, the birds do not do well. You don't get good feed conversion. You don't make money on the farm. You get a higher mortality rate. It's in the interests of the farms to keep the sheds clean, dry and not smelly. So it is the normal operation of the farm, and they're better at it today than what they used to be back then. We went to Lethbridge, stood beside the outlets of sheds with 6-week-old birds in there, and there was not much to smell at all. It was very, very good. I would congratulate them on how well it's managed now.
5 minutes, Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. The bottom line is that this development will be a significant economic boost to the people of Birregurra and for our Shire. 4 new families and houses will become part of this, It's a development that the Lethbridge Shire would jump at if they could. So in that context, I would really like to put this forward for recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I will talk now, I think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is a big decision for councillors. A proposal lodged by Protein for a significant investment in a broiler farm in Colac Otway. Millions of dollars to be spent, many jobs during construction and ongoing jobs, and investment to the social benefit of the community. A contribution to the food security of the nation. Really, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it comes with risk. Risk to nature, fauna and flora, risk to neighbouring farms, and risk to a neighbour's amenity and peaceful enjoyment of where they live. Risk to areas of cultural heritage significance. So have these risks been addressed sufficiently for councillors to consider granting a permit? There's a significant report by BioAssist detailing the risk to wildlife and flora, the legless lizard, various birds including the brolga and various grasses. The report is very comprehensive in its identification of the species impacted and at risk, and then the appropriate, in their view anyway, mitigation strategies. The report outlines what is required to protect cultural heritage, various grasses and plants and fauna such as the legless lizard and hairy crayfish. These strategies have been addressed in the planning undertaken by Protein and submitted to Council. I am concerned with protecting the movement and foraging habits of brolgas, but as a mitigation strategy, I found the report by BioAssist very, very helpful, very, very comprehensive. And they suggest that if the mitigation strategies are implemented, there's no need for referral to the federal government. I am concerned with flooding. This property is subject to natural flooding, which previously resulted in drains having been done by farmers years ago to help cope with runoff in times of unseasonal rain. There is also the issue of disruption to peace and tranquility of neighbours. Various noise mitigation strategies have been offered and seem adequate in my view if allowed to be undertaken. Councillors would have previously heard me express concerns in relation to food security in Australia. It's an identified issue with various bodies, including the National Food Supply Chain Alliance, has called for a national food security plan, which has been echoed by a number of bodies and organisations. The VFF has called for the development of a nationally coordinated food security plan. The poultry industry is particularly sensitive to disease and outbreaks and subsequent loss of birds, which normally would go to feed us. Chicken is the cheapest protein available in the supermarket, and in times of economic hardship is a go-to food to save money.
Time, Councillor Potter.
Oh,
Just
is
about
it?
there. Just about there.
I'll skip some stuff, Mayor, but could I just finish with, look, we've heard from Protein, I raised this as missions hearing, that they would use as many local tradesmen as they can. We have a plethora of qualified builders, plumbers, earth movers, you name it. If this application is supported, I expect Protein not to talk the talk, but to walk the walk.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Hart, you had an amendment?
Thanks, Mayor. My amendment is to remove condition 59, which seeks to limit who may live in the dwellings, and to renumber the following conditions to reflect the removal of condition 59. And having moved that, it might be helpful, Mayor, if number 59 was put up on the screen.
Could we put 59 up on the screen? So that's your amendment to remove that clause.
Sorry, houses plural.
got that up there? Have we got point 59 up there so people can see it? Clause 59? Excellent, thank you. Have we a seconder? Councillor Finnegan. Thank you. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I note I'm just going to speak on the amendment, so I'll reserve my right to speak on the substantive motion in due course. This particular clause seeks to limit who may live in the dwellings associated with this farm property, and I do acknowledge that it's not quite as onerous as it was in the original draft, but I think really, given that these properties will be in a consolidated title, it should be entirely up to the farm owner, manager, whoever, to decide who may and may not live in the houses. I hardly think that they're going to be rented out on Airbnb. We shouldn't be prescribing and adding extra administrative burden for the council too, to start checking up who's living in the house at any particular point in time. It'll be the interests of the owners of this broiler farm that they don't have people living in there who are going to complain about the conditions, and perhaps that's going to be employees, perhaps from time to time. Well, really, it shouldn't be up for us to telling them who can live in these dwellings. I think I'll probably be quiet on this issue. It should be a pretty straightforward matter that a owner and manager of a farm can decide who lives in the dwellings, and we don't have council officers going around to see whether it's an employee or someone who's a family member of an employee. It's just unnecessary bureaucracy to have that particular point in there.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Finnegan.
Excuse me, Mayor, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, go ahead. Then we'll go ahead, Councillor Costin.
Thank you. Can I ask officers if this will cause any concern? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. I'll just explain the rationale for the condition. It's to typically this area has an as of right provision where there's supposed to be a farming zone with one dwelling per 80 hectares. This is honouring that broader strategic requirement and saying, well, okay, to make an exception here to that requirement and allow 4 dwellings where they wouldn't otherwise be permitted, that condition is tying that to a use that has strong strategic encouragement in the planning scheme. So it's to allow that to happen, it's to practically support that industry and business. So that's the broad intent of it. Does it pose great difficulties for us if the condition's not there? I'd say probably not. We've had a discussion on that. We hear the comments of the councillor. But through you, Mayor, it's really there basically to be consistent with the planning scheme. These dwellings operate not so much as farm dwellings, but as caretaker dwellings are pertinent to a broiler farm or a business use in the farming zone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. So it would be reasonable to suggest that this clause, a similar clause, would be consistent with other secondary management dwelling approvals for other farms?
Through you, Mayor, yes, it's not unprecedented for a dwelling to be approved as a caretaker dwelling. It occurs also in an industrial zone where they might otherwise be prohibited. So it's there to support the business or the industry or the farm activity and the day-to-day activities. So that's why it's there.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I'm seconding this amendment because I think it's sensible. Removes an enforcement burden on council in relation to checking up on who lives in the house. An owner or manager of a farm should decide who lives in the dwellings on a property, period. That's my position, but the manager of this proposal is going to have a vested interest in ensuring those occupying houses on the site aren't going to be pains in the backside regarding chicken farm that their house they are living in owes its existence to. So that's why I seek to support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. I'd just like to speak. I'm not particularly in favour of the amendment. I won't get upset if it gets through, I guess, but this obviously is establishment of a principle where you approve for a residence on these otherwise properties that would not qualify for them, and this is the standard clause in that context. I don't think anyone's proposing the council's going around knocking on doors seeing who's living there, but it does give a context where if there is a complaint about people coming in, maybe it gets used for an Airbnb, I don't know, but it gives the council opportunity to react in a circumstance where otherwise they may not be able to.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
I think just probably like Councillor Arnott, I won't be upset if this amendment gets through, but I would probably prefer the clause to stay in, because the concern I do have is that in time, if this is no longer a broiler farm, which is why these houses are being approved, it does have potential to potentially impact on the people who farm nearby, possibly even some of the people who are objecting to this permit. If people not related or associated with farming end up living in the dwellings, and sometimes residential and farming can clash, hence the reason why we do have some of these conditions around the farming zone in place.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I think we've got to look back at what we want to see for the housing for this site. We wanted to house people who take on a caretaker role, as Mr. Rudd specified, but people who will manage the site. We don't want the applicant to reduce the number of people who are looking after the site to gain a benefit from leasing out the house to someone else. So we're looking to require housing to be used for employees on the site, and we want those employees, we want the right number of employees, we need housing for those employees, and it seems appropriate that we restrict the housing to the workers who work on the site. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Councillor Hart, right of reply.
Yeah, thanks. The suggestion that if it stopped being a broiler farm, the houses could be leased out is not correct, because condition 60 already covers off on the possibility that it's no longer a broiler farm. The houses would have to be decommissioned. On the issue of determining who lives in the houses, I think the best person to determine who lives in the houses is the broiler farm owner. And as Councillor Finnegan said, they will, I perhaps won't use the precise language that Councillor Finnegan used, but they have an incentive to ensure that the people living in their houses are familiar with and can coexist with the particular operation as a broiler farm. And it's just as I said before, it's just an unnecessary layer in this whole lengthy permit to potentially require council to start making inquiries about who's living in the house at any particular time.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillors, I'll put it to the vote for the amendment to remove clause 59. All those in favour? Against? Sorry, in favour. Councillor Finnegan. Who else is in favour? Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Hart. Against? You're against. Sorry. Against, Councillor Costin, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Hanson, Councillor White. The amendment stays in. Thank you.
Sorry, the clause stays in.
The condition stays in. Sorry, the condition stays in. The amendment is lost. Thank you,
Thank you.
councillors. We'll go back.
Mayor, are you recording, sorry, with the new governance rules, are you recording the votes? For
Yes.
I think it was a 3-4 vote.
Yes. Thank you, councillor Hart. It's the new governance rules to record who votes. Okay, we go back to the substantive motion. Lost my thread here a bit. Councillor Potter, you'd spoken. Other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I'd firstly like to thank everyone who made a submission on this application. Those submissions, they haven't fallen on deaf ears, and there have been endless amounts of questions from councillors to officers which have been sourced from those submissions, more than any other matter I think I've been involved in. And I'd like to thank the officers for their work in responding with pages and pages of responses to councillors' questions. The environmental management issue is of particular interest to myself. I have a background in environmental management, so I'm particularly concerned with what was happening in relation to environmental impacts. We have a requirement for an environmental management plan, which is to follow the code of practice, the poultry farming code of practice. And I've looked through that code of practice and I can see that if all those matters in the code of practice are addressed, we will have an appropriate environmental management plan. And in endorsing that environmental management plan, it will require the input of other agencies as well. So the environmental management issues appear that they can be managed or will be managed, even though we're not quite clear on what that will comprise at the moment. On the other side, I look at what's the net benefit of the farm, of approving a permit for the farm. And we can see there's jobs proposed during the construction, albeit some of those will be specialised jobs from outside the municipality. But during operation, there'll be 12 jobs at least. There'll be 3 families housed on site. And there'll be considerable expenditure in the local community on trades and suppliers. It's estimated that will be around 1.5 million. There will also be involvement of those families in the community, and the applicant has proposed also some sponsorships and support of shop local, buy local programs. There will be temporary jobs, casual jobs also involved in the catching stages, the placement stages, the clean out, as well as ongoing ad hoc maintenance requirements. So, and the other thing is that with the housing provided on site, we don't have to worry about whether the applicant is able to find people to manage the farm, because the housing is provided, and it's a concern if the applicant couldn't find the labour to run the farm. So,
3 minutes, councillor Costin.
Looking at the environmental impacts can be managed, and the net economic benefit, I'll support this proposal.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. I'd also like to start by thanking the proponent, the objectors, everybody who has made a submission to this application. And I would like to thank the officers for the enormous amount of work that they have put in answering queries from all those people and many, many queries from councillors, which has resulted in dozens and dozens of pages of answering questions and an enormous amount of pages that have gone into evaluating this application. Over my 8 years on council, the use of land within the farming zone has probably been the most hotly contested and even generally misunderstood zone, I think, in the whole of the Colac Otway Shire. The farm zone can be used for all types of activities, and in our shire these include all types of businesses: bakeries, wineries, restaurants, accommodation, wind farms, quarries. The list can go on and on of things that are permitted uses in the farming zone. And so this application for a planning permit for the establishment of a broiler farm at Malerick Road has been evaluated by officers against the planning scheme and the farming zone. And council officers have concluded that the use of the land for this purpose does fit within the planning scheme. There are many conditions that have been recommended, 78 conditions. It's extremely extensive. Even if this permit is granted tonight, it doesn't mean that building will start tomorrow. There's an enormous amount of hurdles to still jump. There are many, many conditions. I would also just like to say that I think what's good about the process and good about the people that have turned up here tonight is that it shows the process is robust. Everybody gets to have their say. At the end of the day, not everybody might walk away happy with the result, but within all the information that we have within the zone, within the assessment against the planning zone, with referrals to all the different authorities, it has been assessed that this fits within the planning zone, and I think, and I support it. I think it can work. I think it can work, and I think it can work within our community.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Finnegan? Oh, Councillor Hart? Okay, Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't propose to repeat everything that's been said. I do support much of it. I think the key issue here is that the planning, we're judging whether or not this is suitable in terms of the planning scheme, and it's in a farm zone. It's an intensive farming industry, but not only is it consistent with the planning scheme and the farm zone, it is actually encouraged. So it's on that basis that I will be supporting the resolution that we're considering now. In doing that, I would like to acknowledge everyone who's made a submission, and I do acknowledge the position of the people who live at the house at 30 Malerick Road, and I have some concerns about condition 37 in that the amount of truck movements that it will allow is quite significant. Condition 37 has been slightly improved in that it covers a longer time period, and so compared to what was in the original recommendation. But I think what this really illustrates is that farming activities take priority in a farming zone, and in some cases that can be detrimental to residences, and that does reflect the actual substance of the farming zone. As Councillor Hanson and I think others may have pointed out, there's been a lot of discussion, notes, questions going back and forth with council officers. I appreciate all the work that's been done, and that has led to change several conditions. It was in red ink when it was showing up earlier, both in relation to condition 37, in relation to who can live in the house. I acknowledge that 59's still there. I haven't been able to get rid of that condition, but at least it allows family members and others to stay in the house, and certain circumstances that can even be if someone's employment has ceased, and that's an improvement, because the one in the original recommendation, how it was read, only allowed the person who was employed to live there. They couldn't even have their family living there. And also the condition 60, which will cause some, if there's a planning application for a different use, that will pause, this is my word, my interpretation, but effectively pause the requirement to remove those houses until there's been a decision on the new planning application. And it may be that there's another planning application in 10 or 20 years' time that doesn't want to operate it as a broiler farm but has another farm use. So I'm glad that those improvements have been put into the recommendation that's been removed, and it's on that basis, and again acknowledging that it is a farm zone and this is consistent with that, that I'll be supporting the resolution that's been moved by Councillor Arnott.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. Much like Councillor Arnott, I actually have my own personal history with chicken farms and the like, and having sort of worked on one when I was younger. In fact, having worked on the one that Councillor Arnott's family used to own. The reality is that this application meets the guidelines set out within the planning scheme. You know, I understand there's been a lot of objectors and a lot of people in support of this proposal, and we've heard a lot from members of the community, far and away more than heard from more people on this than I can remember on any other matter in my time on council, and I think that's a really good thing. And we have taken those submissions into account throughout this entire process. To me, it seems that the proponents sought to address the concerns of objectors throughout this process, and indeed the many conditions on this motion we're seeking to pass are looking to address these concerns that objectors have had. This broiler farm is going to provide much needed jobs and economic stimulus to our Shire, not just throughout construction but long into the future. You know, it fits the purpose. It's something that will do good for our Shire moving forward. And the best thing council can do when we have applications of this nature in front of us, which do meet the merits of the planning scheme, but do attract many submissions from the community, is to listen to those submissions, try and address any concerns that are there through conditions, but in the end, I guess I'll provide a permit for the use the application is for. And on that note, I will be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Arnott, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor White. And as other councillors said, look, I'm not going to repeat what so many others said before me. Just to endorse the comments of those who are speaking in favour of this, it's obvious that we seem to be moving in a similar direction. This is important for the area, this sort of development. It's important that developers can come to this area and put in an application and feel that it will go through a due process, that people have the opportunity to feed into it. We need our residents to be assured that they can feed into our decision-making process, and then we will consider it, because I can tell you that every submission, including everything we've received right up until today, has been considered in detail. As Councillor Costin pointed out, there's been numerous questions put back to our officers via email and phone calls or whatever, and they've all been answered in detail. So this has not become, decision has not come out lightly. So thank everyone for that process. And I would like to think that developers can eventually feel that, okay, we feel vindicated by dealing with the Shire, regardless of what the outcome is. In their concern of the application. Again, reading the officer's recommendation, they've taken considerable effort to ensure the development proceeds in an appropriate manner. And one of the key concerns, I think, is the noise mitigation. And section 35 of the requirements, that goes on to 36, 37, 38, 39, A, B, C, even into 40, and then even into 41, where they talk about the road and its build and putting contributions towards that. All of that is designed to make this a better outcome for everybody in that area, to make sure that it is sustainable, that it makes sure it answers your concerns in the best possible way. I know everyone's not going to be happy, but that's sometimes the outcome of these things. As indicated, the bottom line is this will be a significant economic boost for the area. It is something we need if we want to go to the supermarket and buy chicken at the values we do. If you don't want to pay 3 times the amount for it, if you want this to be affordable food, this is a sort of development the community needs.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor Costin, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott. The motion is carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. And that concludes this unscheduled planning meeting, and I'd like to add my thanks to all the work that's been done by everybody as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.